welcome to our January Trust Board meeting via Teams. We've got the Trust Board members with us today. I think we've also invited our senior leaders to join the meeting and to listen in. And if any of the senior leaders have any questions in terms of agenda items, they can ask them at the appropriate time when I ask for questions from the public. Can board members who want to ask questions or pass any comments on the paper, please raise their hand so that I'm aware who needs to speak, and we'll take it like that. Okay, so we'll have we had any apologies, Karen?
Just apologies from Dave Whiting.
Okay, thank you. Any declarations of interest? No,
it's just mine, Pauline.
Okay, Karen, thank you. Okay. Karen, have you got Karen's declaration of interest?
No, we need to record it for the meeting. So if you could explain, Karen, that'd be helpful. Thanks.
Just to confirm that I'm on Sherwood Forest payroll and I'm working on the Nottinghamshire COVID vaccination team.
Thank you, Karen. Noted. We've got minutes from our last meeting which have been circulated with the papers. Can we take them for accuracy first, please? I'm not going to go page by page. If anybody has noted any amendments, can you put your hands up? Kerry, I think you've got a point to make.
Thank you, Chairman. It's on page 6. The very first sentence on that page starts Kerry Gulliver highlighted and ends with to monitor staff morale. I think we just need to put the full stop after trade union representatives, because we work closely with them to monitor a number of things. It's not just staff morale. So for accuracy, it's better to just say Kerry Gulliver highlighted that the Trust was working closely with trade union representatives. Stop.
Full stop.
Thank you.
Thank you. VJ?
Apologies, I didn't mean to. I meant to mute myself. Sorry.
Oh, okay. No, not a problem. I can't see any other hands up, I don't think. No? Okay, so with that amendment from Karen, can we approve these minutes as a correct record? Somebody not? Yeah, thank you, Stuart. Okay. Matters arising action log. There are no outstanding matters arising, no outstanding actions. All actions that were due have been completed and closed. Okay, great, fantastic. So we'll move straight on then to see if there are any questions from the public relating to matters on the agenda. Karen, have we had any questions submitted?
We've had no written questions, Chairman.
Okay. Do any of the senior leaders have any questions to raise at this point? No, can't see any. Would they show up by raising hands, Karen, or in the?
Yeah, there's no
hands. Okay, lovely, thank you. Shall we move straight on then? And we'll go straight to the Chief Exec's report, Richard. Assume that we've all read it and just draw our attention to the key points.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. So good morning, everybody. On the basis of assuming everybody has read the paper, I will take questions. But what I will do before we take questions, in a couple of moments, I'm going to hand over to the background noise.
Yeah, can somebody mute themselves? Whoever's turning the papers over. Thank you.
That's better. Great. Thank you very much. Yeah, sorry. In a couple of moments, I'll hand over to Ben to give an operational update around sort of January to date position, etc. But I want to, just before we do so, just take this as an opportunity to obviously bring to everybody's attention, but most importantly, say a thank you to the whole of the organisation. This we all know from what we experience daily, what we see and view daily in very different platforms, that the pressure on the NHS is so significant. And all of our staff for many months now, we're talking of 10 months plus, have been facing a growing and a significant amount of pressure equally, many colleagues have been working in very different ways. So they've been working in different environments, working in very pressurised environments. And I think the recognition for what each and everybody has done cannot go unmentioned. Absolutely fantastic, and every day remain immensely proud of colleagues from across the whole of the organisation. We know the period ahead remains very tough indeed. We're planning for what we expect to be an even more pressurised period. So that's something where we're asking a lot from everybody, and I'm afraid we're going to be asking some more in the days and weeks ahead. So I just wanted to, at the beginning point, just pause and say thank you to everybody.
Thanks, Richard. And I think on behalf of the board, we ought to acknowledge the commitment, hard work and loyalty of all our colleagues that turn up every day for work and these very difficult circumstances, and nobody believed that we'd still be in this position in January this year. So it must be very, very hard for some of our colleagues. So on behalf of the Trust Board, a big thank you to everybody. Richard.
Thanks, Pauline. So at that point, I'll take any questions on the Chief Exec paper, and then I will hand over at that point to Ben for an operational update, if that's okay. So is there any questions, please, on the Chief Executive paper?
I can see somebody's hand up, but I can't. It's Karen Tomlinson.
Yeah.
And then VJ.
Okay. Thanks for that, Richard. And I would add, in terms of a special thank you to the community first responders. I know they're part of the workforce as such, but we've been engaged with them a lot, and they've done a real sterling job. So in terms of your paper, Richard, the area that I wanted to particularly pick up on was the PPE compliance section. It's just that, obviously, given where we are, and I know this is the first time we've seen it like this, but it did raise some concerns for me in terms of the percentage of achievement. I wondered if we were putting any extra special measures in to monitor it or to do anything with it.
Yes, thank you, Karen, and I'm pleased you picked out that point. So if I can, I'm going to hand over to Nicola, who will give an update on that item.
Yeah, thank you. You're right, Karen. This is the first time that we've seen this data. So I think we do have to acknowledge that this is the first time that we've used this rapid improvement tool. There's also relatively small numbers where we started with in November. We're obviously rolling this out across the trust now. Those were figures for within EOCs in the main, although there was some frontline cases included as well. We are using those particularly where we're identifying clusters or indeed outbreaks of cases. We've done that. The infection prevention and control team are working really hard with the divisional managers, and I have to say the divisional managers have been absolutely brilliant in terms of engagement with the IPC team and reinforcing those messages on a daily basis. We are continuing to collect that information. I can report that compliance is improving with the results that we're seeing now, and we've really taken the opportunity, I think, with the new variants to really home in on the fact that, you know, it's always been important that we use standard IPC precautions, including PPE, but more so than ever now. So we're sort of taking the opportunity to just remind everybody of how important this is, what the guidelines are, and particularly given that we're now starting to roll out the vaccination, we're really keen that people don't become complacent and understand that even if they've had their first, and indeed when they've had their second vaccination, adherence to standard IPC precautions and PPE will still be really important. So I hope to see that improving. Like you, I was concerned when I saw those figures, but having spoken to the team, they are really confident that actually they're getting really good engagement, particularly from the managers who obviously have to oversee this on a daily basis, but staff have been really receptive as well to their messages.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Nicola. Reassuring. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola. Will compliance be monitored through the Quality Governance Committee as one of their indicators?
It will, yes. It will be included in the monthly metrics report, the integrated quality report that we receive in on a quarterly basis. And of course, you will always see it through these COVID IBR metrics now as well.
Thank you very much. Okay, VJ and then Perminder and then Stuart.
Thank you, Chair. Richard, thanks very much for your report. The things which I'd like to just pick up on are the staff sickness. How are we doing on that front? And also, you touched on the sterling work that our staff are doing. I'd like to just get a bit more insight into the staff morale, how people are feeling at the moment. And the third one linked in with that is, how is the COVID vaccination program rolling out? I know it's early days, but it'll be good to know a bit more about it. Thank you.
Richard?
Yeah, thank you, Vijay. If I may, Vijay, if it's okay, I'd like to come back to these 3 points, because when Ben gives an operational update, some of these items will be picked up, and then if they haven't been covered in that point, then I'll expand further on your responses. I've taken a note of those, if that's acceptable, Vijay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Perminder.
Sorry. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report, Richard. A couple of points I wanted to pick up. One, BJ's already raised in terms of staff morale, and I just wanted to kind of get an overview on time in terms of what's your perspective on the well-being of our staff. I mean, as we've recognised, we never expected to be here 10 months on, but it still seems to be that we're in a long-haul journey. So I just wanted to get a view on how the senior leadership feel that the overall morale, well-being is on the staff. The second point I wanted to pick up on was regards to the review of the maternity services, just to get a high-level overview in terms of how far are we from a compliance standpoint, because there is quite an aggressive timeline on that, but very early 2021 this year, we need to make sure that we're compliant and report on that. So just wanted to get a view as to how much work will this for us, is there a huge gap, short gap, or whatever, or what does it look like? Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. I'll pick up the wellbeing of staff morale point first, which also will link to Vijay's question, and then I'll hand over to Nicola to cover off the maternity services item. Staff morale, I have to be honest, given the sustained level of pressure that everybody has been under for such an extended period of time, there is an immense and clear, palpable level of stress across the organisation, and I think this is reflective of the wider NHS as well. From colleagues who are working in different ways and not in their normal work environment, who have had to work at home for many months, or indeed in different locations, to people who day in, day out are facing the pressures of the 999 calls coming into the EOC, to those on the front line responding to patients in very, very difficult, distressing circumstances. I think equally we're in a place where there is so much crossover between people's professional and personal lives, where the pandemic and the pressures that people face, they're not able to get away from it when they kind of leave work and go home. So the level of stress and pressure across the organisation is immense. Now, that is certainly reflective of what we see experienced in other organisations, and this is through all tiers of the organisation as well, from members of staff who are patient-facing to staff in senior leadership roles. And I think the degree to which people keep coming to work day in, day out to provide the service that they do, and when we look at some of the metrics around how we still respond to our patients, it's very admirable to be able to achieve such measurements in such a period of time. I think that's reflective of the morale and the attitude, and that people still have this desire to do the best they can for the patients that we're here for, and not what they respond to. And what we have been able to do throughout all of this is we have to continually review and adapt the measures that we have in place around how we support staff. And where there are examples of where we need to be able to do things differently, we have done so. And if we need to expand further on that, Carrie and colleagues will be able to give some examples of the support functions that we have in place. I think equally, and it would be absolutely remiss of me not to mention that staff were further affected extremely seriously, given the sad passing of one of their own colleagues from the organisation, and that had an immense response, understandably, across the organisation. So we've had to be able to make sure that we can do everything possible to support those colleagues and undertake additional actions in place. So I think from a morale point of view, Perminda, and VJ's response, I think it's admirable for the level of attendance that we still continue to get, where people doing what they can, the best they do every single day to our patients. But I could not sit here and say morale is good or positive, because it really is challenging. Having said that, I am absolutely amazed and delighted what people do day in and day out, and I think that's certainly a testimony of our staff across the whole of the organisation.
I think, Leon, as your hand's just gone up, is it on this point?
It is certainly on this point, just before Nicola mentions maternity. I was just going to say to the board chair that another surrogate marker for staff wellbeing is the quality of the care that they're providing. And we really get a sense as executives that the pathways that are being used, the non-conveyance to ED, the desire to do the right thing for the patient without sort of jeopardising the quality of the care and the number of SIs and the such like. I think we've been really impressed with the way that the staff have been going about doing their daily business, and we're seeing that through some of the metrics that Ben's presenting to us weekly, Chair.
Thank you, Leon. That's really helpful.
Kerry wants to come in.
Kerry, did you want to add something at this point as well?
Thank you, Chairman. It was on the same point, really, just to say that, one of the things that our leaders are doing and our local leaders are doing, supported by the HR team, is ensuring that they do keep in touch with members of staff, and where we are identifying members of staff who are struggling and needing support and intervention, then the appropriate support and intervention for that individual to meet those needs is available and being put in place. So that was really what I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Gary, I notice your hand's just gone up. Is it on this point?
It's a different point, so we can do cast my letter if you like.
I'll come back to you next then, after Stuart. Nicola, do you want to? I
think it's Stuart.
I think Stuart got a different question.
Okay.
Nicola, do you want to ask a question? Sorry, answer the point about the Ockenden report.
Yes, happy to. The report will be going to QGC next week. There isn't an awful lot that we need to do as an organisation. The letter that came was really aimed at acute trusts with maternity services, and I understand that we're actually to date the only ambulance service who have undertaken a gap analysis and made a response via the local maternity systems. In terms of the areas where we need to take action to ensure full compliance, one of them is around having an identified non-exec director with sort of a champion for maternity patient safety. Having an identified executive director lead, I think we have that implicitly, but it's not explicit at the moment, so we can just confirm those arrangements. The main areas where we need to do some work, and we're engaging with our local maternity systems to do this, is in terms of capturing and utilising the patient voice. So because obviously patients experience care across a pathway, what we don't want to do is set up an ambulance specific maternity voice group. We know that all of our LMSs, our local maternity systems, have patient voice groups, and our aim is to actually engage with them and liaise with them so that we can capture the ambulance elements of the patient's experience of their care pathway. So those are the main areas where we need to do some work. We are expecting some new guidance to be issued around about mid-February. So Ian Mersell has it on his job card to undertake a review of that guidance when it's issued. And if there's anything more that arises through that, we will add that to our action plan. And then just finally, the National Ambulance Maternity Group, which is a subgroup of NASMED, are going to be looking at this guidance. And if anything further comes through the review through that group, obviously we'll incorporate that into our action plan. I suspect there won't be, given that I don't think other areas have done the same review of ours. I suspect that they'll all have action plans very similar to ours in the not too distant future.
Thanks for that very comprehensive response, Nicola. And I'm really glad we've done the gap analysis. I think it's really important. And I'm very happy to be the non-executive lead. I have a particular interest in maternity care, so I'd be very happy to do that if that would be helpful. OK, so Stuart and then Gary.
Yeah, thanks, Pauline. Two questions. They'll probably both be put into the Ben can pick up on them bucket, I think. There's some very good data on hospital handover, and I'm sure Ben will give us some more, but I wanted particularly to know whether we'd had some of those spikes of particularly dreadful days, which we were experiencing, if I remember rightly, early December. So it's not just the average, it's the particularly bad days. And the second one is, I think our data shows what a fast-moving thing this COVID is, in that we're showing, good performance compared to the previous year, and yet other ambulance services are, even as we've started this meeting, news stories of police and firemen being trained to drive ambulances, etc., etc. And I just wanted to see whether we were beginning to see any evidence of a wave hitting us literally in the last few days, and perhaps more importantly, is there anything about the experience of some of our colleague organisations further in the southeast that we might need to build into our own plans, or are we still comfortable that our own plans are robust for any next wave that might hit us?
Thank you, Stuart. I have taken a note of all of those, and again, I'll get the update from Ben, and we'll come back to make sure those points are covered. Thanks, Stuart. Gary.
I think, Stuart stole both my points there. One is word for word, I think. The one about handovers, I would just add to that, whether we're seeing, in the period of time before COVID has really started ramping up again, whether we see any improvements in terms of the processes internal to the hospitals, for example, LRI, to help us manage the flow. Are we seeing any improvements there which would help us when our volumes start ramping up? And I was also going to say that in comparison to other ambulance services, I guess a large part of it, where we are and the fact that we're not showing a similar level of chaos at the moment, a lot of that will be down to, I guess, to our operational improvements, especially around non-conveyance, which have really seemed to help across the organisation. That's thanks to our operational teams, I think. But the rest of that point was, again, in comparison to other areas, and when are we just waiting for a lag before the new variant hits us, and is that why we're lower than last year? But they can both go to Ben if that would help.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. I think just pulling everyone's questions together like this are really helpful, because it gives us an opportunity to answer those operationally, and then we'll come back to any points which have not been covered. So if it's okay, Pauline.
Just before we move on to Ben, I've got a question really for Mike about the underspend on capital, and what's the plan around that?
Yeah, the underspending capital's been there all year. It's related to the vans which were delayed in touring at the beginning of the first wave of COVID. So they're now in the UK, and they're with our converters, and we expect it all to be done by in time to hit the capital programme this year.
Oh, great, fantastic. Thanks, Mike. Thank you. Okay, I think straight over to Ben then for his update.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you, Ben.
Okay, morning everyone. So hopefully I will cover off the questions as they're being posed. Please remind me if I don't, but just to go back to what Richard said, I think what I'm going to hopefully run through over the next 5 minutes will be testimony to the work that all of our directorates put in to support operations delivering over December and Christmas. You heard me waffle on many times about we were planning for winter with COVID, not planning for COVID, and the tap on, tap off type approach. And hopefully some of that has paid, well, not hopefully, it has paid dividends as we've gone through. So I'll just start as I usually do, going through the pillars. So this is to do with December. So resourcing, we put out 2,700 more DCA hours in December 20 than we did in December 19, and we put out 2,000 more FRV hours than we did in December 19. So overall around 5,000 more hours, and that's despite an abstraction of 4% higher than the year before. And most of that can be attributed, if not all of it, attributed to COVID absence. We've seen a particular rise in COVID-related absences since Christmas in the new year. So we currently have offered today or the up-to-date figures yesterday was 338 absent for COVID reasons. That's across the whole operation, the whole organisation, and we haven't been at them kind of levels since mid-April. We started to come down from those levels mid-April, and so we're back at them kind of levels. And just to give you some sort of context, in terms of operational staff, that's around 7%, and in terms of EOC staff, that's around 10%. And we have got particular challenges in our EOC at the minute around abstraction for COVID, which we're managing through the operation team and supported very well through Nicola's and the IPC team. So that resourcing was against a strong position in December. Activity actually in December, for the first time this year when you measure it against the IAP, was more or less exactly on the nose. It was 0.2% down on the IAPs, which relates to 5 fewer jobs a month than we are in the activity plan. That's the first time this year, as I said, that's happened. However, it's bounced right back the other way around now in January, and we're currently running at 3% above the IAP levels, and that equates to about 60 more jobs a day than the IAP level. What we did see around activity in December, and this started to come to our attention probably in November, is there's a shift in the activity in the time of the day. And you might have said, well, yeah, you'd expect that then, wouldn't you, because of the lockdowns and different things. But it's a pattern that we're keeping a close eye on to see whether this is going to be a long-term shift. And what we're seeing is, if you look, is everybody frozen? I just Ben. Can you hear me?
We're losing you, Ben.
I can hear you now.
Yeah, got you now.
Yeah. Okay. So when you look at the hours between 9 and 1700 this year, 51% of our work was between those hours, 51.3, compared to 48.2% the year before. So we're starting to see, certainly earlier 9, 10, 11 o'clock pressure in the system where we haven't necessarily seen that before. Reason for that, we could guess, couldn't we? But I mean, one of the reasons will be, no doubt, will be the pressure that's on primary care at the minute, which is playing through. So that was activity. Hospitals. So we lost in December 7,000 hours to hospital handovers at an average of 24 minutes. Compare that to the previous year, it was an improvement. So we lost 13,000 hours in December 19, an average of 30 minutes. So 6,000 fewer hours lost. However, I think the important note on that one is that's against a backdrop of a 15% reduction in attendances at A&E from us. So we took 6,800 fewer patients to A&E. So going to Gary's point, I don't think that's a process change. I think that is an activity-driven trend. And what we have seen, certainly over December and into the new year, was new hospitals cropping up where we haven't had problems before. So Derby's an example, Scunthorpe's another one, where we're now challenging more across all the hospitals. And I think Stuart Astor, we're still seeing some of them real spikes. We are, absolutely. And we've seen some days on par with the sort of the hours we lost last year. So early in January, I can't remember the exact date, but we lost over 450 hours in one day. And that was what we were seeing regularly last year. So we are still seeing that challenges in the system around hospital delays. And lastly, I'll go on to conveyance before I sort of wash it all up and what it means to in terms of performance. So conveyance, as we know, is much improved. So we've had a marginal improvement in hear and treat. So December, our hear and treat was 9.7%. Our see and treat was 33.1%, and that's a 7% improvement on last year. So overall, our conveyance to hospital was 57.3% compared to a 64% December last year, and that's continued. In fact, it reduced even further in January. So what does that mean in terms of overall performance? Category 1 for December was 7 minutes 25, and the 90th was 13 minutes 15. Category 2 was 26 minutes 46 seconds and 54.40 on the 90th. And Cat 3 on the lead was 1 hour 22, and on the 90th 3 hours 14. The really good news hidden away in all of that is Leicester, Northants and Nottinghamshire all delivered national standards for Category 1 and Category 1 90th. But I think when you look at your comparers to last year, a marked improvement in all standards. So 45 second improvement on the C1 mean, and a 1 minute 20 second improvement on the 90th, 15-minute improvement on the mean on the C2, and a 33-minute improvement on the C2 90th, and C3 45-minute improvement on the mean and a 2-hour improvement on the C3 90th. So I think, as I said at the start, credit goes to all the teams, all the leadership teams for the planning, and not just the planning, the execution of the plans. Lots of preparation went into this. We didn't know. There was lots of unknowns certainly over Christmas and New Year. New Year, we didn't have as busy New Year's Eve as we traditionally do, but it was still busy. We were still taking a call every 30 seconds instead of every call in every 20 seconds that we had done in years gone by. So I think credit to the teams for the way they've prepared for that, and that continues. So there's not many operational colleagues on the call today, and that's because meeting this morning to continue the reviewing of our plans and what more we can do. And I'll just finish on the morale question that was asked. I'll reiterate what Richard said. Let's not kid ourselves that we're a service under pressure. We've got a tired workforce. We've got a fed up workforce. There's new challenges thrown on us every day. But in general, as we've seen by the delivery, we are maintaining a really solid and good service to the patient, and a testimony to, again, everyone that's involved in this, in the delivery, because it doesn't happen by itself. A lot of work does go into it. So I'll finish there and happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Ben. And I think for me, the salient point from that update was that although we're not meeting most of the national response standards, despite the challenges that our staff are definitely facing, and despite the significant increases in activity, and despite the absences that we've got, resourcing remains strong, and performance is so much better than it was last year, and so much improved. And we need to acknowledge that. There's a massive improvement on response times compared with this time last year, and credit for that must go to everybody in terms of the frontline staff, the managers, the support staff, people keeping the trucks on the road. It really has been, I think, an impressive performance under these very challenging circumstances. So thanks for that update, Ben. We've got a few questions, I think. Stuart, who's TK?
It's Karen.
Oh, sorry, Karen. Karen Tomlinson, and then Stuart, and then VJ.
Okay, Pauline, thanks for that. It took me a while to work it out.
Yeah, it's the TK bit through me.
Yeah. I just wanted to pick up, and I know we've had the conversation about safe PPE practice, but I couldn't help thinking about the correlation between the rates of compliance with PPE versus the number, because I think, Nicola, you said that most of the data had come from EOC. What we're now seeing is the consequences, because I think, Ben, you said that there was a higher rate of sickness in EOC than in the rest of the workforce. Is that correct?
Higher rate of, well, we're dealing with an outbreak in Bracebridge at the minute, yes, around COVID, which is putting its challenges on that area.
I just think, I know I'm stating the obvious, and I'm sure it's going through everybody else's mind at the moment, but I think that's a salutary lesson. We've had an area that's not practicing tight PPE for whatever reason, and what we've got is we've got an infected area of the workforce.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Nicola might come in after I've said. I think one of the huge lessons we've learned from this last period around that is it was the asymptomatic patient staff that has caused us the issue, and I guess that could have been and would have been combated had the potentially more PPE been done. So yes, I think you're absolutely right. We're learning all the time around this and what we need to put in place.
Absolutely, Ben, and it's, please don't take it as a criticism. I think it's just an observation that we need to, it's there. that's exactly what it's telling us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Karen. Nicola, did you want to come in there?
I did, yeah. Just to say that we are sort of obviously doing investigations of all of the, not just outbreaks, but where we have clusters as well.
Yeah.
And there is some early sort of learning in terms of some of the sort of causation, or what we think is the causation. And it's really interesting, some of it, because it's stuff you probably wouldn't think of. So of course there's transmission within work and out of work. And I don't think there's any surprise that we started to see more cases the 2 weeks after the sort of Christmas period. So some of it is linked to sort of behaviours outside of work. So we've been really keen to sort of promote, you know, the importance of adherence outside of work as well. Within work, one of the things that we've identified is that it doesn't pay to be kind to each other. So one of the things that was happening quite a lot over the really particularly busy period of Christmas, New Year, was that, you know, say for example, a team leader would very kindly make
the drinks
for everybody. They're really asymptomatic, and so now we've had to be really, and it's really horrible to do, but we've had to be really firm and say make your own drinks. You know, don't be sharing food. But it's, you know, it's some of the simple things sometimes that, you know, you need to make sure that you're really tight on. And as I say, we've had really good engagement from the teams.
Good. Thank you, Nicola. Stuart and then VJ.
Yeah, thanks, Pauline. Yeah, Ben, just pushing a little further on. I mean, what I took from your presentation was it's, you know, it's certainly not easy out there. There's a lot of work going on, but our normal processes are handling it well, as you said. And I'm just wanting to sort of double check that we're not thinking that we're going to be pushed into extreme measures that aren't currently on our plans by any forthcoming wave. And clearly one doesn't have a crystal ball, but
no, I think we can't take anything off the table, Stuart. So we're already engaged with the fire are already supporting us in our plan anyway. We haven't engaged with the police. We through the SCGs, we haven't made any requests. Would it have been in our plan had we not heard it? What, in London? Probably not. But I think we've now got it in our mind should we need to. But it's certainly not up there in the plan at the minute. And absolutely, we are learning and speaking to other trusts to put any other actions in that they may have done, London South East, that would support us should we need to. So yeah, so certainly still a good network of learning going on.
I'm sorry if I might slight supplementary on that. Have we been doing any support for other services during?
We have absolutely. So not from a resource point of view, because we didn't have the capacity to do that, nor did many other ambulance services. We've done an awful lot of support on call taking. So since way before New Year's Day, we were taking London's calls in a very structured way. So between 5 and 7% of London's calls a day have been taken by us. And that's been going on for the last few weeks. We've been supporting Yorkshire in a similar way. So yes, so that's where we've been offering our main support for that. And again, that adds more pressure into a pressurised environment, because it is wholly the right thing to do. You know, my take on it is, if you're picking the phone up in, let's say, 10 seconds and another service is picking the phone up in 5 minutes, it is just not right. You have to share that load across the service, and now we've got the technology in place to make that happen. However, I absolutely recognise for our EMDs that they perhaps don't see it in that way. They see it as they're taking London's calls, and I get that. I 100% get that. And we've done a lot of engagement with them around why we're doing it. And you never know. You never know when the boot might be on the other foot, and we might need that support ourselves.
Just on that point, Ben, are we still in a position to be able to provide that ongoing support, or are we getting to a stage where, because of the outbreak we've got at Bracebridge, we might need to pull back on that? So
we've turned our support off yesterday. Okay. We were down to 1%, offering 1%, and we went to 0 last night. We will review that. We review that twice a day on the national calls, and to see what offer we can. We're in a national command and control over call taking now, actually. So the NAC the National Ambulance Coordination Centre are overseeing that now. And what they do is they come to us and say, you will take this percentage of calls, and then it's for us to say, no, we can't for X, Y, and Z. Because what we found in the early days was some trusts were just wanted a better turning the back on it and not taking any calls, and others were standing up more. So I was pleased and did push for the NAC to take over this function, and they are doing so. We have turned it down, and we'll see where we go from here. But we're doing a lot of work. Simon and the team are doing a lot of work in looking forward in terms of what our staffing is going to look like, and planning when people are coming back through the timeline of 10 days.
Yeah.
And lessons learned from Yorkshire was, don't plan on 10 days, because 10 days quite easily turns into 12 to 14 and there on after. So we're making sure that we as best we can, we're forecasting ahead.
Thanks, Ben. VJ.
Thank you, Pauline. So my question around the sickness in EOC has been answered. Thank you for that. In terms of incentives, Ben, are we still continuing to use incentives, and is there a take-up amongst our staff? And also, are you or somebody else able to give just a bit of an update on the COVID vaccination rollout, and how is that going, and is our staff taking it up?
Yeah, okay, I can do both, and then someone else might be able to chip in on the vaccine. I forgot what your first question was. Sorry.
It was around the take-up of the incentives.
That's right. Sorry. Absolutely, yes. So we just signed off the incentives yesterday to run till the end of March. We are getting an uptake. I haven't seen how we're running in January, but certainly in November and December, we were putting out an additional 7 or 8 crews a day through incentives. So if you think about it won't just be 7 or 8 crews through incentives. It'll be also backfilling some of the gaps we've got. So there is an uptake on that. Again, we've got to balance that very carefully against, at some point we have to turn them off. You know, people get used to incentives, and also more importantly is people are tired. You know, I've said it before. You know, although we need our workforce at the minute more than ever, and they're doing an amazing job, a fantastic job, we do have to think longer term about, you know, when the vaccination kicks in, when things start to return to normal, whenever that may be, our staff, we can't afford for them to all fall off the perch because they're tired and relaxed. And so we've got an eye on all of the welfare around that as well. And in terms of the vaccine, yes, we've commenced vaccine. By the end of today, 90% of our EOCs will have been vaccinated. The ones who won't have been are either the ones who've declined, or the ones who are either stood down for COVID reasons because they can't have the vaccine, or staff on maternity or long-term sick, for example. And likewise in the divisions, we're having a good uptake, and in all divisions now either have a programme where they're linking into the system to have the vaccination through the system. Karen, very gratefully, we've done a great job in Nottingham and helping us out there, and likewise everyone else. And also we're now rolling out our own programme as a top up as well. One interesting lesson about the vaccine for EOC, and I'll back this up, is yes, it's brilliant that we've done it over 2 days. We've found a lot of people are having the side effects from it, me included, and it's not nice. I'll give you that. It knocks you off your feet, and we've lost a couple of EMDs and coordinators because of that. But actually, it's still the right thing to do. You know, the fast rollout of this will be a benefit to us in the long run. But perhaps had we known some of the side effects, we might have slowed down a tiny bit. But never mind, we're off and running with that now.
Thank you.
Can I just add on thanks, Ben. Can I just add on the vaccine programme? So colleagues will be aware that originally the plan for EMAS staff was to be vaccinated in the local health systems within the local hubs, and the main reason for that was due to the storage issues of the Pfizer vaccine, where it was not practical for us to be able to roll out that vaccination programme. One thing that we felt was that with the announcement announcement of the AstraZeneca vaccine being available was that we would be able to run a successful vaccination programme based on the success of the flu campaign, where we know across the Midlands we were one of the highest performers for workforce vaccinated. So we were accepted and recognised to become a hub in our own right. So in effect now what we have is two parallel systems where we, as of the weekend, we commenced the rollout of the AstraZeneca vaccine to our own workforce, and we will also be allowing our staff to still attend local systems where vaccines are available to them, often at short notice, because there often tends to be at very short notice slots are available for colleagues. So we're confident with that we will get a high proportion of the staff across the whole of the trust vaccinated in the coming days. Once we're in that position, we'll be able to report accurate data to the trust board.
Thank you. We couldn't start to include it in the COVID metrics dashboard?
Yeah, we'll also just be taking guidance from the requirements and reporting poorly on that.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Karen, did you want? Oh, she's put her hand down. Okay. Will Pope, you've got a question?
Yeah, thanks, Pauline. Actually, Richard just answered most of my question on vaccination, so I won't repeat that. I just wondered if we should say, obviously we've said it before, but thank you to Kerry and team, well, actually to everybody, for the 100% staff approaching on the flu vax, and in some appropriate wording as a board support the 100% approaching on the COVID vaccination, you know, with a very positive sentiment, and perhaps we could adopt that. And I know the team will be going for it anyway. I did have two unrelated questions, Pauline, if there's anybody still on the vaccination, I could come back to those.
I can't see any other hands on the vaccination, Will, so go for it.
Okay, thank you. It's a little bit picking up on Karen TK's point around the around the PPE, and I wonder if would it be appropriate if we encouraged members of staff who observed inappropriate use of PPE or non-use of PPE to raise an IR. I'm just thinking, I don't know what the right mechanism is, and others will know better than me, but I'm thinking there not only of the infection risks, of course, going both ways, but also it's a health and safety issue, isn't it? And I don't know whether that's worth thinking about. And then, sorry, Pauline, just a second question, then I'll close. And apologies if I missed it earlier, if somebody mentioned it, my signal is a bit iffy at times here at home. The SI performance that in the report, it's great that we had no SIs up to the point of the, I think, 23rd of December in the report, but is there an update on SI performance at the moment? And if it's still low isn't the right word, is it? Because actually, you know, in an ideal world, you'd have zero, but then you'd worry that people weren't reporting them. So you can't win either way. But are we sure that if SIs are still a lower than normal number, should we say, that people are still reporting appropriately? That would be my question. Thanks for that, Pauline.
Thanks, Will. I think they're both for Nicola.
Yeah, if I can, just before I hand over to Nicola, and I know Nicola will give a very comprehensive answer to both aspects of that. I think in relation to the PPE, I think the only cautionary note I would say on this point is that we're focusing on a metric which is, I would suggest, has significantly moved since the point of reporting. The behaviours and practice that are in place across the organisation have changed significantly, and you know, I can speak from where I am today in the the HQ, the EOC Centre, the practices in place are absolutely excellent, including regular touch point cleaning. Everybody is in appropriate PPE. The fact that we took a decision very early on in the whole COVID experience of putting in the protective screens, which is something which other organisations didn't, and experienced very large outbreaks very early on. So I think there are and will always be areas of learning. There will always be examples of where maybe there's been a slight lapse in some of the actions required, but general behaviour, including those operationally we see in ambulances and colleagues out there on the front line, I would say is a very high standard. So there's just a caveat from my point. And Nick, I don't know if there's anything to come up on that.
Yeah, staff do actually report via IR1. Some of the COVID-related IR1s that you'll see in the dashboard do relate to non-compliance with PPE. Of course, my preference would be that staff actually address that with their peers at the time so that it can be immediately rectified. And I have to say we are seeing numbers of those reports going down, which I think sort of tallies with what Richard's just said in terms of compliance improving. In terms of the SIs, I, like you, am concerned that making sure that we are not identifying serious incidents. We haven't reported any SIs to the end of December, and to date we haven't reported any in January. I asked the same question of my team that you asked of us, Will, and I'm assured we held the twice weekly incident review groups, including over the festive period. We are still reviewing similar numbers of cases through the incident review group. It's just that they are not meeting the threshold for serious incidents. I do think we're better at identifying whether they meet the threshold early on now. So we're doing a rapid review process. So when these cases are brought to incident review group, we know whether the two criteria of an SI have been met. So has the patient come to harm, and was it due to an act or omission? So we're not reporting. You'll remember we've had 5 reported this year that have been subsequently downgraded. So we're not reporting those now, but I am confident that as well as reviewing incidents through the incident review group, we're also doing our proactive pieces of work, such as the harm review processes, to identify anything that may have been missed. And what we're assured about when we do that is that actually we're not finding new cases of harm that we're not already aware of. So I'm confident, and I think it might have been you, Will, that raised the question around percentage of PSIs that were low and no harm in the last report, because they were flagging as red, I think. And I said to you at the time, you will find that those will turn green, because once we've had an opportunity to review and identify the harm level, that tends to go up. And I'm pleased to say I was proved right. I did double check. So we are above 90% for those now. So to my mind, if people are reporting those low and no harm incidents, I have confidence that that's indicating that we're a mature reporting and safety culture.
Thank you, Nicola. And just on that point about PPE, I would really reiterate Nicola's point about encouraging colleagues to challenge their colleagues at the time. It's one of the big things that we had to do in hospital around norovirus and C. diff, was to challenge people that weren't complying with PPE on a one-to-one basis, and that's always the best way to do it, and giving people the confidence to say to their colleagues, why haven't you got a mask on, or etc. And I think we need to do a little bit more of that potentially. Okay, well, if there are no further questions or comments, I think we've had a really good discussion this morning about the Chief Executive report and a comprehensive update from Ben on December's performance and the current performance to date. So I'd like to bring that discussion to a close and adopt the Chief Executive report for assurance. Thank you. Okay, let's move straight on then to the next section of the board agenda, which is the the strategy section of the Trust Board, and we're going to talk a little bit now about the transformation programme update, which has been sent to us for assurance, and I think it's over to Will. Assume that we've read it all, Will.
Lovely, thanks very much, Chairman, and good morning to everybody. So I think this transformation report goes hand in glove really with a lot of the conversation we've just been having, especially around contributing to some of that improvement that we've seen in terms of our response standards and trying to create a platform for us to maintain that into the future. And that's been a lot of the kind of the backbone of why we have this transformation program and why it contains the schemes that it does. And when you take a kind of a step back and look at what's covered in this transformation program, we've got specialist practice, we've got operational efficiencies, we've got investments across our digital platforms. We're improving our quality and our IPC standards. We're transforming our EOCs. We're embracing home working as an organisation. There is such a quantity of work in this transformation programme, but it's all focused around making sure that we can deliver the right care to patients, have a sustainable workforce, an engaged workforce, and making sure that we're putting the steps in place for us to be able to manage our organisation into the future as we cope with today, but think about tomorrow at the same time. There's only one red area in the report, which I think is just worth touching on, and that's the hospital handover collaborative work, which is red rated because, as we've seen in the update from Ben and in the IBR metrics, it's not at 15 minutes, which is where it needs to be. Despite the fact that there's other national consultation work going on around urgent and emergency care standards and things like that, which no doubt we'll cover in a future trust board, actually this work was about trying to enact real change on the ground, supported by the regulators, at a system level, trying to make sure that we hit that 15 minutes. And unfortunately, that's not been the case as yet. I think there's lots of reasons for that. Ben might want to comment on that particular area in due course. I don't attend those meetings personally. I know Ben does. But ultimately, I think because of the pandemic and because of the pressures in hospitals, especially around hospital flow, it's fair to say that that programme has now moved more towards trying to manage handover situations and making sure that they're as safe as possible, rather than necessarily tackling the root causes and trying to get them down to 15 minutes, because within the current pressures of the NHS, it seemed that that could be very problematic indeed, just from a hospital pressures and a discharge perspective. So I don't know, Ben, whether there's anything you wanted to add to what I've just said around that red area, or whether I've covered it all, but I'm happy to pause there, Pauline, and answer any questions on the report.
Thank you very much, Will. Have we got any questions for Will on the transformation report, which is submitted for assurance? Perminda and then Will.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Will, as always, a very comprehensive report, and appreciate the update. As you recognise yourself, I think, yes, there is that one red area, but there are significant amber areas. And it always does kind of make me a little bit nervous, because amber, is it more closer to green or is it more closer to red? So, you know, it's quite a kind of a middle ground, but you never know which way it's going on that. And I just, going to a point that you made, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, for us, the first and foremost is patient first. So it's really looking at which of those programs that are going to have the biggest impact, etc., etc. So in terms of the current situation, the bandwidth of all the people that need to be involved in progressing these areas forward, do you believe that there's anything that we need to perhaps review and see that can we really deliver these in the time framework that we set out? Because I know that there were some very aggressive timelines in achieving the outcomes from this and executing on them. And I'm just curious to know that are we going to achieve this, or are we going to see this continuation of, you know, well, we are a little bit behind, but we'll get there. But do we need to just perhaps just take a pause and see, well, look, these are the real deliverables and we can achieve them, and perhaps other areas may be something that we wait for later on to execute on?
I think when I think about the capacity of the organisation for transformation, I think about kind of the key areas which are in the report here. It's really clear that there's certain areas which have more capacity to be able to deliver transformation because of their particular function and role in the organisation anyway. So if you take the digital agenda, for example, the digital agenda has a long-term program of work, a long-term route map of what it's doing. It has capital investment to be able to support that with the right resource around that as well. So there's no reason for us to feel overly concerned about the digital areas, for example, because regardless of what's happening with COVID, notwithstanding things like office moves and home working and those kind of things, actually the program around digital is fairly hardwired into the structure of our finances, the structure of the resources that we have. So I don't feel overly concerned about that continuing in terms of delivery. I think what we need to recognise, though, is where there's areas which call on our frontline leaders, our operational colleagues to be able to support the transformation. So where we've got things like operational efficiencies, frontline leadership review, etc., the timing of those things is really critical. And although we're seeing, my concern is we're in a fine balance at the moment. Although we're seeing improvements around things like non-conveyance, we need to make sure that we're understanding why those are occurring, but also putting the steps in place to allow them to continue afterwards, but not doing so at the detriment of frontline leaders' capacity to be able to lead the front line through this really challenging time. So I think there's a fine line in all of that, but Ben no doubt will be able to comment more around capacity in the front line for change and for transformation. But I think a lot of the programme around the operational side is probably more of a incremental change and trying to lock in what we're already doing and what we're already experiencing, rather than a kind of a big bang style of change. Just touching on the estate work and the EOC transformations as well. When we think about the work that's already gone into our EOCs in terms of social distancing and configuration of our EOCs through this challenging period, actually that work is around cementing a lot of that for the future. So again, it's not necessarily big bang change in terms of a major upheaval piece. It's more about making sure that we lock in the changes that we've made already in a more sustainable way for the longer term. So again, it's about making sure that we've got the right people and the right resources assigned to these. But my view is it's the operational side that we have to be really careful with to make sure we don't destabilise any of our frontline operations, because clearly that's where we need the leadership focus to help us through these periods. But I think broadly speaking, I'm comfortable with where the program's at in terms of resource and the ability to deliver. Ben, I can see you put your hand up. Do you want to add anything to that?
Only in that you're absolutely right. We've got to balance that capacity, but also we've got to be careful of the unintended consequences of some of these as well, just to make sure that we don't tip anything over that we perhaps hadn't thought of properly. So we just extra caution at this time. Not necessarily the wrong thing, or they're not the wrong things to do. It's in the timing probably more than anything else, and we just need to think about that carefully as we move through the next 2 to 3 months.
Yeah, Richard, can you just come in there?
Yeah, just on the back of this. So just for assurance for non-exec members. So yesterday, as an example, we considered the transformation update at our extended exec session, and I think for assurance, as an executive team, we will not take something forward if we believe that there is going to be a detrimental impact across the organisation, and we would then advise the board of that situation that we're doing. So at the moment, all of what Will has reported on the paper, which has been presented, has been further considered through an extended exec session, and we'll continue to have that programme running. And if factors out of our control and related to COVID and pressures within the organisation impact, which mean we have to delay or indeed stop some of those initiatives, we'll equally make that judgment as well. But at the moment, echoing Will's comments, I believe we're still okay where it's reported.
Just on that point, Richard, where the executives review the timeline and the work and believe that there might need to be a delay and they change the timeline, will they have that conversation with the appropriate NED?
Yeah, absolutely. I know the exec directors have got relationships with the non-executive executive members as well, so we'll be able to almost have like a further checkpoint process in there, and I'm confident we will advise the board if there are any concerns which we have to take a judgment on.
Thank you. VJ.
Thank you, Chair, through you. So I think just looking at this issue of timing and assurance from the net perspective, I'm happy to share with you that after conversations with Leon and Dave and Ben, it's good to get an understanding of the thinking, the timing, and some of the nuanced work that needs to go on around it. And I must admit that the recent conversations I had with Ben and Leon, I got significant assurance in terms of understanding the impact on people practices, the unintended consequences, and how timing is everything in the change process. And I found it extremely helpful and assuring.
Thank you, Vijay. Does that answer your question, Perminder?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks very much, everybody. If there are no further questions, can we take this report for assurance? Yeah, thank you. Lovely. And then the next item on the agenda is the prolonged wait time review, which again has come to us for assurance and is presented by Nicola. Sorry, I've missed a paper out, haven't I? I'm desperate to get onto the prolonged the harm review, you see. So anyway, back to the very interesting paper, Will, on the integrating care proposals, which again has come to the board for assurance. Over to you, Will.
Thank you, Chairman. I won't take offence, don't worry. So this paper is twofold, really. It's a brief on a set of proposals and questions which were laid out in the November joint board between NHS England and NHS Improvement on the future of integrated care systems, and it also discusses potential legislative change around the NHS as well. But it also then, towards the back, contains our response in terms of that proposal, as it was an exercise where there was an online questionnaire we had to fill out and submit. But also the response from Joined Up Care Derbyshire as our host integrated care system, because we participated in a development session with Joined Up Care Derbyshire to be able to formulate that response as well. So I don't know how you'd like to do this, Chairman, but I'm quite happy to go straight to questions. The paper should be fairly self-explanatory. What I would say is this is the first time where we've worked with one of our Northern Ambulance Alliance colleagues in terms of the paper, because you'll note at the start of the paper the description and the kind of the narrative around what this is from NHS England and Improvement I didn't write. It was written by one of our colleagues in the Northern Ambulance Alliance. So I think that's very useful, and obviously saved a bit of time in EMAS for that. So I just need to acknowledge the work that went into the paper from them. Obviously, the rest of the paper is ours. And our response is our own, clearly. So yeah, happy to answer any questions, but obviously some significant change on the horizon.
Thanks, Will. And I think the board members will have seen this paper and several responses from several organisations several times over now, but as all the ICSs, STPs are developing their responses. So we're well versed in the paper, so there's no need to go through that. So thanks very much. We'll go straight to questions. Stuart and then Karen.
Yeah, thank you, Will. I'm not sure what the questions are. Well, if the questions are probably not questions of EMAS, they're probably questions of the process more broadly, I think. But clearly quite a comprehensive set of changes being proposed, but no mention whatsoever of social care or anything outside of the NHS, which I personally find difficult to rationalise with the fact that ICSs are supposed to cover all camps, but I don't know if there's any comment on that. And secondly, and this may not be exactly the right point in the agenda to pick it up, but the position of ambulance services as regional services, there's sort of allusions to that in our responses, particularly around financial arrangements. But I wonder if there's anything a little bit more definitive that could be said about that, because that is different. That is different to an acute or otherwise. And maybe I'm not clever enough, but reading the papers, it doesn't really tell me anything about how that problem is likely to be to land at the end of the day.
Yep, I can respond to both of those. Yeah, thanks, Stuart. So I think the social care, voluntary sector, etc., third sector, I think that's seen through everything I've read kind of around this this set of proposals, feels as though that would be dealt with through partnership working aspects of the ICS. And certainly within Joined Up Care Derbyshire, there's starting to emerge a governance structure which has got specific focus on partnership working between local organisations, and that's not just NHS partners in those conversations. So, I think because this set of proposals was written from almost a legislation point of view, it starts with kind of the law around the NHS, our constitution, etc. That's probably why it feels quite heavy in that direction and doesn't really talk about social care and the voluntary sector, third sector partners. But certainly on the ground in the ICSs, it's really evident that those conversations are happening now. So there's absolutely I don't think there's any concern over continued engagement, continued partnership working with those organisations and further development of, despite the fact that it's not explicitly mentioned in this particular piece. In terms of the ambulance services and the kind of slightly strange articulation of regional but need to be local at the same time conversation, which seems to flow through the document, I think this, unfortunately, is probably further complicated by the other piece of work that I alluded to earlier on, which has come out from NHS England around urgent emergency care standards, because it's looking likely that in the future, integrated care systems will have an urgent emergency care scorecard, which will include ambulance category 2 performance at an ICS level. And as we'll all know, we're not commissioned to provide category 2 performance at an ICS level. We're commissioned to provide category 2 performance at a regional level.
We lost you there, Will.
Sorry, can you hear me now? Hello, can you hear me now? Yeah, Stuart can hear me. I'll carry on. On that basis, that would suggest that we've got to have a slightly different relationship with our ICSs going forward, because if we're going to be tasked with delivering performance at an ICS level as a part of an integrated care system, that obviously is a very different style of relationship and different style of contract going forward. So I think it's I think this document was written with knowledge that UEC work was coming out, but it hadn't come out at the time when this was released. Therefore, the fact that it hasn't nailed its colours absolutely to the mast from an ambulance service perspective is no surprise to me. There is work going on internally in EMAS around that urgent and emergency care set of standards and a response to that, but also at a national level through ACE as well. So ACE has pulled together a response to this particular set of proposals, the integrated care proposals, and it's also looking to pull together a response around the urgent emergency care standards as well. So there is lots of feedback going to the centre. I can't stand here or sit here and give you an answer as to how it will land for ambulance services in terms of commissioning and our contracts, but it probably will be slightly different to how it is now, because what we have now doesn't seem compatible with where things are going in the future, particularly, would be my view.
Just on that point about the joint and emergency care paper, Will, we'll be discussing it as a board in February. The deadline for the consultations after our February Trust Board meeting, so it's agendaed for some time in February. Well, it's agendaed for the February board discussion. Okay, and another bit about social care. All of the ICS's STP discussions I've been involved in, that's come up as an issue, and the general view is, except from our local authority partners, is that's covered in the flexibility around the governance structures. Yeah. I know some local authority partners would like to see that much more explicit in terms of a relationship, and that's why some local authority partners are much more supportive of option 1, I think, than option 2, because it makes that easier for them as a local authority in terms of governance. Okay, thank you. So I think we've got Did we have another hand up, or have I missed that? Karen, yeah, Karen Tomlinson.
Hiya, thanks for that, Pauline. In some ways, some of the comments that I want to make will be better placed in the February discussion, I think. But for me, this paper, together with our transformation programme that we've got, will and does link together. And for me, what this does, this current paper that you're talking about, Will, I think that gives us real good scope in terms of the partnership working and where we see our whole paramedic workforce working across a different set of boundaries. So for me, it will absolutely be a different commissioning portfolio that we're working with in the future. So I'm gonna leave it there, Pauline, because I think in February I look forward to the discussion, because I think this will inform our transformation programme even more and give us a real purposeful journey over the next 3 to 5 years in a very different way.
Thanks, Karen. Any other questions or comments from for Will? No. Well, I think what are we asked to do with this paper? Just remind me.
We're just considering it and noting that we've already submitted our response.
Thank you very much. So we've considered it, we've noted it, and we've submitted our response. So thanks very much, Will. Okay, we're now going to talk about the prolonged wait harm review. Straight over to Nicola.
Thank you very much. So this paper has previously been presented to the Quality and Governance Committee on the 22nd of December, and the committee took assurance from this report, but it was felt that it would be useful for the board to see this in its entirety as well. So this covers a period, a week commencing 26th of October, which was a particularly challenging week for performance at the time. We've obviously had more challenging weeks since. And this looked at the 5 longest prolonged waits across each of the categories 1 to 4 across all 5 divisions. The eagle-eyed amongst you will note that that doesn't add up to 76, which were the number of cases reviewed, and that's because thankfully in a number of divisions we didn't have 5 prolonged waits in category 4. In a number we actually didn't have 5 category 1 prolonged waits either, but where that was the case we looked at just the next longest. In terms of highlights from the report, we did identify 1 case of potential harm, which was a patient who was FAST positive on our arrival. I had hoped to have an update for you by today's meeting, but I'm afraid that I haven't. We've been asking the acute trust where this patient was transferred for details of outcome diagnosis and whether they believe that the delay impacted the care that they were able to give and therefore the outcome for the patient in any way, but we've struggled to get hold of that information. We have raised it as a service to service, and so we do hope to get a response on that soon, but I think we're all acknowledging that the pressure that organisations are under. Actually getting hold of that information isn't particularly easy. We did notice that obviously where patients are frail or elderly, there is an increased risk of issues such as pressure area damage and pressure ulcer development. We did identify 3 deaths within this sample. However, those have been through our learning from deaths process as well. And it has been identified that because of the amount of time that patients were without output and without resuscitation prior to us even being contacted, at the point of our arrival, resuscitation was futile and the delay did not impact on the outcome. Just to let you know, we have done further harm reviews since. We've done a significantly increased sample of cases. We've looked at 712 cases from week commencing 16th of November, and we've looked at both where there was a prolonged wait for a response in the community, but also that was a particularly challenging couple of weeks for hospital handover delays. That will be going through the next Quality and Governance Committee, but just in terms of some highlights from that, the longest hospital handover delay in that sample of 712 cases was 7 hours. Again, we have not identified that patients being cared for on the back of ambulances is unsafe. However, what we have identified is it is not optimal care, and there are potential for delayed harm in terms of things, particularly where patients are frail and elderly, in relation to pressure ulcer development. And I think we would all just recognise that this is just a really poor patient experience, and indeed staff experience as well. So we're doing some work through QGuard at the moment to look at a standardised methodology which all ambulance or English ambulance services will use, so that actually we can collect this data on a much larger scale, which I think will be really helpful in terms of the system discussions that we have around impact of delays, both on prolonged waits for response in the community and the risks of having prolonged handover delays at hospital. So very happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Nicola. Any questions for Nicola? Is that Kerry? Yeah, Kerry Gulliver.
Thank you, Chairman. Nicola, it was on the point in relation to the equality data, and I note from the action plan there's been some work with CARU. Is there any further information that you can share so that in our development of the updated education and training around equality and diversity, that we can include some of this to further emphasise the need to record the protected characteristics on the individual records?
Yeah, absolutely. As you'd expect, I've had conversations with Paul and Luke in relation to this area. And certainly what we've recognised is that what would be helpful is if people had a better understanding of how we then utilise that information. So Paul's going to work with me to look at a case study around how having that equality data means that we can analyse the quality of our services and identify improvements. So I'm picking that up with Paul and Luke.
Thank you, Nicola.
And it wasn't going to be data collected in the national template, but I've asked for that to be added. So, so the national work will include equality analysis as well.
Great.
Any other questions? Nicola, I've got one. I don't know if it's for you or for Ben, and it's in regard to the two cases that are described in the paper. One, the potential harm of the lady you talked about with the fast test, and then the other one was the gentleman that waited, well, just under 13 hours for a response, 12 hours 55 minutes. Both very, very long waits, prolonged waits, and I just wondered what the process is in EOC when somebody's waiting that long for a response. Do we still do a follow-up call? Is there a mechanism for escalating it? But I was particularly thinking about the gentleman that waited nearly 13 hours for a response.
Yeah, I'll take that, Nicola. Yeah, absolutely, Pauline. We've got a very clear process within EOC around stack management and looking out for the jobs that need to be upgraded, and there are facilities to upgrade to whatever category the clinician feels appropriate. I haven't looked at that case in depth, but I would assume that call will have been a clinician will have looked at that call more than on one occasion and seen whether it was appropriate for the patient to wait or not. So that is a process that takes place. Yes.
Yeah, and there was definitely evidence that had happened through the reviews, and I think it's one of the conclusions that I come to. I think the fact that when we do these reviews we don't find significant harm, I think, is some assurance around the processes that we have in place to identify and mitigate potential risk.
Thank you very much. That's really helpful. If there are no further questions, then we're asked to take this report for assurance, and I think we can do that. Thank you. The next section on the agenda is just for assurance, and it's the records of business from the subcommittees. Now, unless anybody wants to raise any particular points, I suggest that we just do take them for assurance as a pack, unless anybody wants to point anything out or is concerned about anything they've read in any of those records of business. Mike. Mike, Stuart and Kerry. And Nicola.
Thanks, Chair. And I won't go through the paper. It's probably worthwhile just informing the board that we had discussions at the FNP about this year's financial performance and next year's contract. And just to let the board know, things are still very unclear about how the financial regime will finish this year and how it will start next year. But we are working around some various mitigations. The only thing I need to bring to the board's attention is that there will be an expectation that this trust will deliver an underspend. That would be more of a notional underspend. Our control total stays the same, but we as part of the STP stroke ICS have agreed to underspend slightly this year. That will be taken care of mainly with our COVID allocation.
Thank you, Mike. Stuart. Stuart, you're still muted.
Sorry, I pressed the wrong button. Yeah, I took my hand down this time, which I've failed to do previously. Yeah, just a couple of things from QGC that I think are worth airtime in the minutes, even though they are clearly on the paper. I think it's worth celebrating the award that Chesterfield Royal Hospital had been presented in terms of outstanding performance for our non-emergency patient transfer service. And the other thing, not for a debate now, but I suspect it might be something we pick up more at some later date, the very helpful update we had on CQC's latest directions. I think one of the things that was highlighted in that was an increased focus on a patient voice in the way that NHS organisations are led, etc. And obviously for an ambulance service, whilst we've made huge strides on patient voice type stuff, that's quite an interesting challenge. So I just thought it's worth having board members aware that that's coming, but I'm not suggesting we debate it in detail now.
Thank you, Stuart. BJ.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted for us to take a moment to just celebrate and recognise and congratulate our teams in terms of the flu campaign. So 95% of our staff were offered vaccination, 84% of staff were vaccinated, and behind that stat lies a lot of hard work, planning and collaborative working across EMAS, and I think it's worth just recognising that.
Well said, BJ, thank you. Kerry?
Thank you, Chairman. And it was just picking up on VJ's point, just to clarify the final position on the flu campaign, and it was an accelerated programme over 6 weeks maximum, really, where we normally have at least 3 months. So we achieved 87% of staff vaccinated and 100% of staff approached. So again, echoing VJ's comments, a fantastic achievement, and again, an increase on what we achieved last year as well. So just to give those final figures there.
Thank you, and that really bodes well for the COVID vaccination. Thanks, that's great. And then who else have I got? Nicola, sorry, Nicola.
Thank you. It was just to say on the December QGC, we've also appended the exec summary, or part of the exec summary, from the impact of operational performance on quality report that the committee receives on a 6-monthly basis. I just thought, given the conversations that we've had around operational performance, that's just another source of assurance for the board in terms of mitigating the impact of that.
Thank you very much for drawing our attention to that, Nicola. Thank you. Okay, so with those additional comments, we'll take assurance from the board subcommittee papers submitted, and we'll move on to the last section of the board agenda, which is the governance section. And the first item is the fuel card and associated services contract extension. Mike.
I won't go through the paper, but the summary of this is we have a contract with All Star. This is the fuel which we buy from petrol stations rather than our own bunkers. Advice from Crown Commercial Services, it's not much point at the moment going out, and they recommend just extending when the contract on.
I missed
my
that.
recommendation is we accept that.
Mike, unfortunately, and I don't know if it's just our signal, do you mind just saying what you've just said again, because we didn't hear it clearly?
Right, so we have a contract. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. We have a contract with All Star, and this is the fuel which we procure, which is not from our own bunkered fuel, so it's slightly more expensive than bunkered fuel. The contract's let through Crown Commercial Services, and it's all emergency services, police, fire, ambulances. They recommend at the moment that we don't go out to tender. there's nothing to be gained by it, and we'll just extend the contract and review the situation in a year's time. My recommendation is we do that.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Mike. We heard you that time. Any questions for Mike? Karen?
Yeah, it was just to confirm, Pauline, that we've discussed this at FPC, and it was a recommendation from FPC that the board support it.
Thank you very much, Karen.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, then with that, are we happy to approve this contract extension as described in the paper by Mike? Yeah, lovely. Fantastic. Next item on the agenda then is the board assurance document on infection prevention and control. Nicola.
Lovely, thank you. Yes, so you'll remember that you received the board assurance framework on IPC back at our July meeting, I think it was. That was after the guidance had been issued by NHSEI in May. It has been updated again since then. The last update was in October. And then shortly after that, NHSEI also issued a checklist to provide board assurance on testing and IPC related to COVID. So they're both very interrelated documents. There's quite a lot of overlap between the two of them, hence me bringing them together. They're obviously very long documents, so I'll just give you a quick précis of the changes in the October version of the BAF and what that means in terms of our compliance with it. So the main changes related to acute hospitals actually, and it was about management of patients and discharge of patients, but there were clearly some sections that were very relevant to us in terms of introduction of staff testing and vaccination programmes. In terms of movement since the last time I brought the BAF, from a positive perspective, since that time we have recruited our head of infection prevention and control, Liz Hoyle, and I have to say I don't know how we ever managed without her, because it already feels like she's worked for us for absolute years. She's doing a fantastic job. We've also got some additional resource. Lisa Lamming, who's one of our EOC team, also has a background in infection prevention and control, and she's providing some additional support to the team on the bank, which has been invaluable. We've also had Mike's recruited to his sustainability and waste vacancy, and Stacey, who's I can't remember her surname, I apologise, but she's working really closely as well with the infection prevention and control team, particularly around the waste management aspects. We've implemented the rapid improvement tool, which we've talked about quite a bit today, and we're obviously rolling that out across the trust, and that will provide us with ongoing assurance in terms of compliance. And of course, we've introduced since then the twice weekly lateral flow device testing of staff, and now the COVID vaccination programme. The papers do identify where there are still some gaps in assurance or areas that we need to continue to improve. And we do have the work stream standards to prevent infection as part of the transformation programme. And Dave Whiting, as SRO, has established a programme board, the first meeting of which will be on the 18th of January, but good progress has been made in those areas already. So very happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Nicola. Any questions for Nicola? Gary and then Perminder.
Thank you, and thanks, Nicola. I had one question, and an item came up twice. Well, it's item 7 in the checklist, and also 1.6 in the related framework. It's about lateral flow testing. I mean, in both those points, there are comments about the testing is going well, but the reporting needs encouraging. And I just wondered how we can get assurance that our staff are not infected and perhaps asymptomatic, and perhaps deal with patients when they perhaps shouldn't be?
Yeah, it is a difficult one. We know we've provided kits to significant numbers of individuals. I've had mine delivered this morning, and the staff are required to provide their test results on a twice weekly basis. We know at the moment that we are not getting full compliance with that. We believe that people are doing the tests. It's actually just the reporting of those results that they're not necessarily doing. We've looked at all sorts of ways in terms of making that as easy as possible for staff to do, including posters with QR codes. It is a really difficult situation in terms of how we improve staff's compliance with that. We use every opportunity through our comms. We've got a conversation cafe tomorrow, and no doubt things I will cover in my update, again a reminder, but I don't know whether Karen or Ben have anything they wish to add on this, but it's just something that we need to continually plug away at, I think.
I think so, yeah. I think just as, again, if it does assure you that 33 of our absences currently are through to LFT testing. So we are getting people do it and standing down because of a result of that. And then obviously they go for the full PCR test after that, so they quickly don't stay in that reporting area very long. But currently we've got 33, so that gives us some assurance that people aren't doing it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Karen, did you want to add anything to that? Karen Sullivan.
Nicola and Ben have covered my points really. Probably only just to say that we are seeing an increase in the numbers of people that are reporting. Still not where we would like it to be, and we are taking every opportunity to remind people, as others have said. But yeah, we just need to keep pushing away at it.
Can I just ask you? Sorry, go on, Gary.
Sorry, Polly. Maybe it's just one thing to reconsider when we come to looking at the BAF later on, because it might have an impact in terms of our BAF risk.
Okay, I see where you're coming from there. We'll pick that up then. Karen, you know the lateral flow tests, are they voluntary? Does staff have to do them?
No, they are voluntary, Chairman.
Okay.
We do say if they take them, it's a requirement that they report, so they can't voluntarily choose to report, but yeah, we don't enforce it, and that's a national approach.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Leon, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, just to comment generally, I think it's part of the armament of fitness for work, isn't it? Whether that be through mental health, physical health, lateral flow result, or otherwise, all people attending work on that day self-declare that they're fit for work. I think we just need to continue to lead and encourage them to report it in a timely manner. So, as you say, we're getting that assurance that our workforce are not asymptomatic carriers.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Will, is it Will? No, Paminda. Sorry. Did you have a question, Paminda?
Yeah, thank you, Pauline. My question was also around lateral flow testing, and I know it's voluntary, and a lot of what was going through my questioning, Gary's already mentioned there. But all I wanted to now ask was just how do we compare, or do we have any sense of what lateral flow testing looks like in other trusts? I mean, are they struggling with the same? I mean, I know some medics on a personal level, and when I've spoken to them, they've said, well, we don't do this because otherwise if we take it and we find that we're positive, then not only I have to be away from my job, but then my family has to be as well, which I know, you know, we can all shake our heads on this, but I just wanted to kind of, you know, did you have, Nicola, any sense of what, you know, anything that perhaps any initiatives that other trusts are doing that encourage more of these tests to be done, or is there anything else that we may need to consider to encourage more of this?
I think I'm aware of, but I know Karen and Ben have got their hands up, so I don't know if able to.
Shall I come in, Chairman?
Yeah, please.
I really don't think it's an issue about encouraging people to do it in this organisation. Take-up has been huge. So I really don't see the same problems that other organisations seem to be highlighting there. And I think a lot of that is probably our approach to what happens when people get a negative test. So, sorry, positive test. Obviously, we are encouraging that we're expecting them to stand down and you know, there are appropriate arrangements in place for that, and of course they get paid when they're stood down. So we don't have that issue that possibly some non-NHS organisations have with this. So it is really just the reporting that is an issue. I firmly believe that the majority of our staff are actually undertaking these tests.
Well, if I can also add as well, certainly some of the conversations I've been involved in at a regional level and national level, we're certainly in a place where we've had, as a result of a really good rollout programme, we've got lots of kits out to stations and to colleagues. There are still organisations who are not in a position where staff have got access to for varying different reasons, which is frustrating and disappointing. But we're not in that place. So I do think ours is simply a reporting issue. And as Karen Sullivan's quite rightly pointed out, we've seen an uptake on that. I think the approach we're taking to engage, promote, encourage is clearly having an impact, and we will continue to promote that.
Okay, thank you. Ben, did you want to add anything?
Just that in terms of our encouragement, in terms of the EOCs, we've gone a step further over the last couple of days to protect our EOCs. We're asking them to do at the start of every shift that they're on duty.
Yeah.
To try and stop some of the spread, and you know that'll be a short-term thing because we won't have to do it forever. But while ever we find ourselves in a situation where we're wanting to protect themselves, the staff and their colleagues as best we can, so we're really encouraging it.
And are they reporting the results?
We'll see. We've started.
Yeah, we've just started it, yeah.
Yeah, we just started it last week in Bracebridge, this week in HP.
Okay. So if anybody has any suggestions about how we can better encourage our colleagues to report the results of their lateral flow tests, they'll be greatly received, I'm sure, by Karen and Ben. Ben, have you got another point, or do you want is that an old hand? An old hand. Great, thank you. So we're asked to receive the report for assurance. If there are no further questions, are we happy to do that? Okay, thank you. We've now got the governance report presented to us by Karen for decision. So Karen, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll keep this very brief. This really just does look at something that we look at annually, which is our standing orders and also our meeting arrangements, including membership of board and committee. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Karen. Any questions for Karen on any aspects of the report? No. Okay, so we're asked to approve the standing orders. Yeah, everybody happy to do that? Nobody? Agree the schedule of Trust Board meetings for the next financial year and put them in your calendar. Yeah, thank you. Confirm the board and committee membership as set out in the report. There should be no surprises in there for people. Yeah, and to agree the meeting arrangements set out in the report. And just I think the only difference is that we've identified that board subcommittees can continue to meet, formal board subcommittees can continue to meet virtually next year, but ideally should meet face to face at least once a year. That's a slight difference to the current arrangements. Okay, so thank you very much, and thank you for the paper, Karen. The last item on the agenda then is the board assurance framework, which is presented again for approval.
Thank you, Chairman. Obviously, this is the regular report which you receive at each meeting. I'm happy to answer any questions, but probably the only thing I wanted to add is that myself, Will Legg and Mike Naylor met yesterday to have a look at a BAF risk, which we haven't included in this report at the moment because of the timescales involved, but to have a look at the finance risk and in particular the new arrangements for contracting and the ICS and the implications that those will have for the trust. And we're recommending that the Finance and Performance Committee give some consideration to that at their next meeting.
Thank you, Karen, that's helpful. And we've just had a conversation, the conversation we've just had about lateral flow tests and poor compliance with reporting, and whether or not we believe that that constitutes a staff or patient safety risk that needs capturing on the BAF.
Could I suggest,
we've got a COVID risk register, haven't we?
We do, yeah. Could I suggest that we continue, given the update that's been provided this morning, that this is a metric we continue to monitor through the appropriate groups. I don't feel it warrants an additional risk BAF related at this stage.
Okay, and can we include the results in the COVID dashboard? That's up to the board.
Yes, we can. With, and I think we'll put an appropriate health warning against those related to the kind of the requirement and the ask. I think we'll carefully think through the way we report that.
Okay, thank you. Gary and then Kerry.
I was just going to say that I think the lateral flow risk is actually appropriately covered by risk 8 already. Along with the actions in there, I think we just need to monitor the actions that are being taken, and if there is any concern or those actions don't have an effect, then we'll perhaps address it then.
Okay. Oh, I think it's on the COVID risk register. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that, Gary. Noted. Thank you. Kerry.
It was exactly the same point as Gary, Chairman, so it's been covered. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so we're asked to approve the revised board assurance framework, including the changes outlined in the report, and they're discussed on the executive summary. Are we happy to do that? Yep. Confirm that the BAF adequately identifies the strategic risks and the risks are scored at the appropriate level in line with the Trust Board's appetite. Yeah, and consider whether we have sufficient assurance in relation to the risks included in the BAF.
Yes.
And to note that the Finance and Performance Committee have been asked to consider a new risk in relation to contracting relationships for next year. Is that about? Describe it well, Karen?
And the ICS implications.
And the ICS relationships. Thank you. And they'll report that back to the next board meeting. Okay. That then brings us to the end of our board meeting, our Trust Board meeting in public. Thank you, everybody, for your contributions. I'd like to suggest that we take a 15-minute break for a coffee. It's 10 to now. It's 10:48. Shall we reconvene and dial into the private board meeting at what, 11:10? That people give people time to stretch the legs and get a coffee. Okay, so we'll reconvene at 11:10. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thank
you. Thanks, Pauline.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.